there before in the past. And they'll come right down, you know, close to the houses, but never had a domestic animal taken, never had any livestock taken, you know, never any threatening encounters. So these cats they're good kitties. And so lastly, education, which is why we do stuff like this. And so just a little background on cats. These guys are made for doing one thing, and they do it very, very well. They're very efficient. They're predators all the way. They have what's known as carnassial teeth, which is the last upper premolar and the lower molar right here in their shearing teeth. So basically, they shear the meat. They don't chew it all. They basically shear off the meat and swallow. And so they're 100% meat eaters. You know, they will scavenge from time to time, but of course, most of the time, they're actually killing what they eat. And here is just a skinned out mountain lion, and you can just see how incredibly streamlined he is and how muscular these animals are. And they're very good at what they do. They're highly efficient animals. And so as far as captures go, most of the captures that have occurred around Grand Canyon have been use of leg snares right here. Here's probably about the best one I have for you here. It's just a padded leg snare. It's attached to a cable, which is attached to a very solid object like a rock or a tree or a root, so the animal's not going anywhere. But we've also employed the use of cages on time to time. And then most of the Flagstaff area cats have been caught using a houndsman. So we've employed the services of wildlife services and a few houndsmen, and so they'll actually tree the lion, same way you hunt them, but instead of killing them, you actually just immobilize them. So a couple different ways we capture the animals. And so once we actually get the animal down, this is what we put on them. So this is mostly what we use. It's a Telonics collar. And all the collars we use are going to have the VHF antenna, which is basically just a radio antenna, GPS antenna, and then the cool thing about these collars is the Argos antenna right here. So what I do is program these collars to take 6 points a day, and then every day during a 4-hour period, the collar actually hooks up with the satellite, which actually sends the data to a base station, which essentially sends it to our emails. So it's basically like getting as close to real-time data as possible on these cats. Usually it's about 24 hours late, but it's still really close to getting real-time data, so it's a really cool system. And all the collars will actually have this as well. It's a collar release mechanism, and so we program the release roughly about a year or so into the life of the collar. So the animal's not wearing the collar all the time. We try to recapture sometimes some of the same animals, but other times we just kind of let the collar drop. So it kind of just guarantees the animal's not going to be wearing the collar for his whole life. And we've had roughly about 75% GPS success with these. The other collars that we use, very similar, GPS antenna, will have a VHF antenna, collar release as well. But these are essentially a direct download collar, meaning I have to have a good radio signal before I can actually communicate with the little PDA and base station with the collar, and then I can connect to the collar and download all the GPS points. It's the same principle as the other one, but it's just not as convenient, because usually I have to fly and find these guys from the air, especially at Grand Canyon, because it's so expanse out there, and it's just very difficult to find these guys from the ground. And so just some of the things we do when we capture and process the animal. The first things we do, of course, is sex the animal. This is a male. He usually has, you can see the black tip on his penis sheath right here. And females will have that as well, but it's usually a little setback closer to the anus. So the first thing we look at is the sex of the animal. And then boom, put the collar on. That's why you capture these guys. You want to make sure you get the collar on. These guys are down, and they can be down sometimes for, hour and a half with the drug combinations that we use. But you have had some that have actually kind of gotten up before and moved around a little bit. So you want to make sure that, you put the collar on first, because that's why you go through all the effort to capture these guys. We also look at the teeth. You can get a rough indication of how old the animal is just looking at the teeth. And right here, these are the outer incisors, and they're a little bit longer than the inner incisors. And once The level actually gets to about the same as far as the incisors, which is pretty much a straight line across. The animal is roughly about 4.5 to 5 years old. This guy right here is about 3 to 4, just looking at his teeth. This animal over here is quite a bit older. This is a female. I caught her last spring and she was 12.5 years old, which is very old for a wild mountain lion. If they're living to be, 8 plus, they're actually doing pretty well around here, considering how heavily they actually are hunted. And you can just look at her teeth. She has no incisors. Her teeth are super stained. Her canines are just completely round. But I also take a gum recession on these guys. So a measurement of gum recession, and then you put it into a little formula, and out spits the age. And so that's really a more accurate way of looking at it. We also take blood samples for DNA. We weigh the animal, take all kinds of body measurements, palpate the body, make sure everything feels all good in there. And basically give them a reversal drug, and boom, send them on their way. And so this is what we have so far in the study. 46 adult collared animals. We've had 5 kittens. In all the study areas, this is our number right here. Roughly about the same with females and males. The Grand Canyon, a little bit skewed towards the males as well. And this has kind of become an infamous picture of a Grand Canyon for one of the cats. Super little, cute little kitten. Here's an example of a couple females right here. This guy is kind of famous. He's been captured, he's been snared. You can see the his leg snare right there. He's been snared 6 times at Grand Canyon. He's worn 5 different collars. And so he's contributed a lot to cougar ecology. And he's still running around. Actually recollared him in October of last year. And so he's been on and off wearing collars since roughly late 2004, early 2005. So he's contributed a lot. And this is a young male that caught about a year ago. He lasted about 4 months or so before he was killed. And so things we do in the field. First of all, you saw the GPS points on one of the slides. Boom, 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 they're everywhere. So typically cats are always moving. They have huge home ranges. And when these cats are actually in the same location over a series of multiple hours or multiple days, you can deduce that they're there for a reason. And the rationale is that they're sitting on a kill. So they're sitting on one of these guys down here. And so we kind of wait for the animal to move up and then move in and check out what the kill is. And this is kind of what we base our cluster analysis on. 2 or more consecutive GPS locations, that's within 100 meters over at least 8 hours or more. So if that meets that criteria, we usually try to go in. We don't get to all of them because, we are staff limited, and these guys make a lot of clusters. So we try to get the most of them that we can. And this is just some of the data that we collect. We collect landscape data. We collect vegetation component data, cover types, of course, the prey, the species, amount consumed, bone marrow consistency, and I'll show you that on the next slide. We look at burials in the kill sites. Was the animal dragged? Scats and tracks in bed sites. So we just do a whole comprehensive analysis to really try to understand what's going on with the behavior of these cougars at kill sites. And so this is just a few things we look at. And these are just perfect puma tracks. It's rare you find something that nice, and especially this one right up here. Usually just the soil just doesn't allow for tracks that good. So these are just really sweet tracks. Here, a big pile of poo. And my volunteer Paula, who just left, and she and I actually found this. This was from one animal that was actually mating with a female, one of the females, and he left this huge pile of scat right there just to say, hey, I've been here, and this is my lady essentially. And my volunteer could not get over the amount of poo. And she's like, I've never seen this much poo in my entire life. So it was actually pretty impressive. So. And so we look at drags, and we look at, if we try to find dens of kittens and such. Right here, this almost looks like a burial. You see this huge ponderosa tree, and this is a huge, what would appear to be a burial down here. But it's actually a scrape. And cats will actually scrape to mark their territory.